A few years ago, in a small village, a loud noise on the ground caused a rupture beneath a cemetery, from which emerged a man claiming to be the king of a prosperous kingdom trapped in the hands of a mad wizard. He offered everything his kingdom had to anyone who could defeat the wizard. After saying this, a mysterious man turned to dust and disappeared. In the present, a group of adventurers faces a red dragon, one of the creatures in a dungeon. However, they were at a significant disadvantage because they were fighting on an empty stomach. To make matters worse, one of them, named Leos, was distracted by the fact that the group had lost a day wandering due to a map error, leading them to fall into a trap and lose food for 3 days. While the group struggles to face the dragon, Leos thinks that, due to circumstances, the best option is to retreat after that fight. Suddenly, his thoughts are interrupted by Fallon, his younger sister and the group's mage, pushing him. Leos wonders why she was doing that when he realizes the dragon was very close to them. The creature bites his sister, and only then does he look around and realizes that everyone was practically dead, with no chance of defeating the dragon. To save his friends, Fallon casts a spell that transports everyone safely out of the dungeon before being devoured by the creature. Leos wakes up in the middle of a forest and finds another mage from the group named Marcel. She explains that a spell took everyone out of the dungeon, but no one could find Fallon. Leos then explains that her magic didn't work inside the dragon's belly, but you will go back to save his sister. However, Marcel explains that everything they had was left in the dungeon, and now they are without anything and weakened by hunger. At that moment, the rogue of the group named Chilchuk appears and reveals that 2 members abandoned them to join another group of adventurers. Their situation was not good, and Leos knew that exploring dungeons was costly because they needed to hire companions, buy equipment, and get food. He thinks the only solution is to sell their current equipment to get some money to buy cheap equipment and the remaining essential things they need. However, that would take some time, and they needed to be quick to prevent his sister from being digested by the dragon. The 3 think about what to do, but their stomachs keep growling. Then Marcel suggests they eat something first, since there was a good chance they failed with the dragon due to fighting on an empty stomach. Marcel and Chilchuk start thinking about delicious foods, but Leo says he has to go back to the dungeon to save Fallon and asks the 2 to leave the group like the others did. This way, they wouldn't have to stop using quality equipment, and he could reach the lower floor of the dungeon without encountering monsters and without putting anyone else in danger because he felt guilty about what happened in the dragon fight. But Marcel insists on going along because Fallon is also important to her, and her magic could be useful. Chilchuk also says he wants to go along, reminding them that they need a rogue to open doors and disable traps. Leos is moved that his friends don't give up on the group but asks if they are prepared for whatever comes their way. As both agree, the trio goes to the dungeon entrance, and Leos explains that they will eat there because there are various types of monsters in the area, indicating a complete ecosystem with herbivorous and carnivorous monsters. The 3 enter the dungeon, and Leos tells them to think about the monsters they face, as there must be many tasty things. However, the 2 friends strongly disagree with him. Leos then recalls that many people used to eat monsters to survive, but Marcel says he was referring to criminals who eat monsters because they can't return to the surface and end up hospitalized for food poisoning. The 2 argue about this when suddenly a seemingly novice group appears in tears, fleeing from a monster, which turns out to be a small mushroom that Marcel defeats with a simple blow to its head. Leos gets excited about the idea of trying the mushroom monster, but Marcel and Chilchuk disapprove of the idea, asking if it wasn't too risky. However, Leos explains that according to his book, which had a beginner's guide to dungeon food, mushrooms are edible and have a mild flavor. The friends don't seem to have much confidence in the book, but Leos was determined to prepare the mushroom. At that moment, they hear the steps of a giant scorpion, and he goes after it to hunt the creature. Monsters emerged from the depths of the place, but it was not clear whether a forbidden spell transformed the terrestrial creatures or if the monsters were summoned from their world. However, they all had a strange appearance and attacked humans as if protecting something, serving as evidence that the cursed capital really existed. Leos finds the scorpion and eliminates it as if it were a lobster, making his companions realize that he had actually been waiting for an opportunity to taste monsters for a long time. Leos says that doesn't change the fact that he wants to save his sister, but admits that he loves everything about monsters, such as their appearances and ecology. That's why he always wondered about the taste of these creatures. Next, the group goes to a busy area to prepare the dish because there was water nearby. The dungeon was frequented by adventurers and merchants, especially in that area where there used to be a sacred cemetery, but became the busiest place there after being connected to the dungeon 6 years ago. Leos starts by cutting the mushroom in half, realizing it was the easiest way to slice the creature, and Chilchuk comments that this way it looked more like food, despite Marcel disagreeing and remaining resistant to the idea of eating monsters. Next, Leos puts the entire scorpion into the pot, explaining that, according to his book, the venom is edible and not harmful. However, When he tries to taste it, he ends up feeling sick from the flavor. At that moment, a man appears interested in the scorpion stew. He explains that the preparation was wrong because the claws, head, and legs of the creature had to be cut off because, despite the tail not being harmful, it has a bad taste. Then he slices the scorpion for easier cooking and removes the internal parts, explaining that they are bitter and have a terrible texture. As for the mushroom, a significant part of it should be thrown away because the stems are the ones with a pleasant taste and smell. The man gets excited about the dish and decides to use his larger pot. Then he cuts some plants from the area to season the food, but Marcel questions him because it's a cemetery. She starts screaming at the man when suddenly a green goo starts falling on her head, covering her face and preventing the mage from using any spells to save herself. Marcel remembers that her first death was caused by goo and starts having difficulty breathing. However, the man easily dispatches the creature with a knife, explaining that dealing with goo is easy when you know its composition and where to hit a fatal point. He further explains that the creature senses the prey's breath, making the person an easy target if they scream loudly, which justified the goo attacking Marcel. Later, the man also explains that the monster is not edible in its current form, but if properly prepared and dried in the sun, it becomes a delicious food. However, drying would take 2 weeks, so if he has a portable net, he may destroy the monster. Then the cook reveals he has the final product with him and decides to add it to the dish. He mentions he has spent over 10 years researching dungeon cuisine and is pleased to find someone else interested in monster cooking. He prepares the entire dish, surprising the group with the result. Leos and Chilchuk are amazed by the flavor, convincing Marcel to try it, and despite her initial resistance, she loves the food. After everyone eats a lot, Leos realizes they still don't know the man's name. So the cook introduces himself as Senshi, a researcher in his language. The three also introduce themselves, and Leos explains they are on a mission to rescue a partner who was devoured by a red dragon on the lower floors of the dungeon. Senshi explains that these creatures usually sleep most of the day and digest more slowly than other monsters, offering to join the group. Leos welcomes his help, exciting Senshi as he has dreamed for years of cooking a red dragon. Senshi begins thinking of the best way to prepare the creature, and everyone thinks it's not a good idea to eat a dragon that eats people. Still, no one questions the cook's dream. The four head to the second basement floor, which according to the scholars, leads to the pinnacle of the Golden Castle, a place full of trees that, although extremely tall, doesn't reach the surface due to the cursed dungeon. As the group is tired, they decide to take a break and spend the night in a hollow tree, as they have done before. However, they are starting to feel hungry again, and Leos decides to hunt monsters for dinner, disappointing Marcel. He asks what the mage would like to eat, but everything she thinks of cannot be found in that place. So she just asks for something edible. According to the book, the area they were in only had bats and rats, something unhygienic, forest goblins, which they discard because they are semi-human and living armor, which is also unappealing because it's metal. Marcel asks if there's nothing normal like birds or wild fruits, giving Leos hope to find some monster-eating meat. Senshi explains there are many fruits in that area that could serve as food. This excites Marcel, but she changes her mind upon realizing that the plants are also monsters that devour people. However, Leos explains that they don't actually eat living beings, giving an example of a flower called Baracelia that releases a web-like mucus to capture its prey but doesn't digest them. Instead, it turns them into fertilizer. He also explains that although sometimes the plant uses humans for nutrients, it's not much different from what happens with common vegetables. Chilchuk agrees and adds that it's unlikely anyone would die that way on the second basement floor because it's busy and has a corpse search team. Marcel accepts and decides to kill the plant with her magic, but Senshi stops her, as it would also eat the fruits they were going to prepare. At that moment, the mage gets distracted and is captured by another species of plant, which spits out its latest victim, leaving her desperate. However, Leos easily saves her with his sword. Marcel thanks her friend, and he explains that this species is called shadow tail, a parasitic vegetable that plants seeds inside the skin of its prey. Unlike the other plant capable of breaking bones, this one needs to capture and immobilize its prey without hurting them in a way that is comfortable. He asks her how it was to go through that experience, annoying the mage. Afterward, the group gathers the fruits and Senshi teaches the correct way to prepare them with scorpion broth, finishing a pie that, like the last dish, everyone approves of the taste. However, Marcel confirms first that there is no plant that feeds on people in the dish and only then tries it, enchanted by the taste of the pie. She starts talking about how delicious it is, making Leos happy to see his friend starting to take an interest in cooking, but she denies the fact. After eating, everyone cleans up, wondering what to do with the man who came out of the plant because they don't have time to return to the city. So to prevent him from being exposed to some creature, they hang him high. Later, they rest, and Marcel has a nightmare. while Leos reads his book about dungeon creatures, realizing that it is a place where a person either eats or is devoured. Marcel dreams of her mother cooking a delicious meal. She says she made her daughter's favorite dishes for her birthday, though when Marcel gets closer, she sees various dungeon ingredients. She wakes up startled and puzzled because she smells food, just like in her dream. Chilchuk explains that another group nearby is preparing breakfast. Marcel watches them from afar and feels envious seeing the group enjoying grilled pork. Senshi explains that a diet of bread, wine, and meat helps gain resistance for dungeon exploration, preventing malnutrition, scarier than any monster. The couple laments not having meat, commenting that Marcel envied them for needing fat in her body. However, Marcel clarifies she envied the other group's meal for having no monsters involved. Still, Senshai decides to hunt monsters with meat or eggs even better because they provide all the necessary nutrition. Laios and Senshi consider going after a basilisk, a creature with a chicken body and snake tail, deadly due to poison in its claws and fangs. Chilchuk jokes it's like eating chicken, and Marcel doesn't entirely disagree. Laios finds monsters with mixed features fascinating and expresses curiosity about comparing the taste of a basilisk to a cockatrice, another monster with a snake tail, found deeper in the dungeon. Later, the group discovers a basilisk nest and decides to steal eggs while the mother is away. Laios hands an egg to Marcel, who finds it oddly soft. Suddenly, they hear a basilisk scream. Everyone quickly grabs the eggs and hides except Marcel, who stands holding one of the eggs as the mother returns, chasing a pair of adventurers. The guy gets scratched by its poisonous claws when she notices Marcel holding one of the eggs. The basilisk starts chasing Marcel, and she runs while her group watches from a distance, judging her escape. Chilchuk tells Laios to help the mage just as she stumbles. Before the basilisk attacks, Laios appears, making strange noises and spreading his arms and legs to seem larger and more intimidating. This embarrasses his group, and they wish they didn't know him. Next, Senshi prepares to attack the snake, and Laios takes the opportunity to face the chicken. Since the basilisk has two heads, attacking them from different directions confuses his brains for a moment, allowing the creature to be eliminated. Thus, they defeat the creature and check on the poisoned guy. Despite not being well, Senshi fortunately has the antidote. However, the cook refuses to give it to the adventurer before preparing it, explaining he intended to use it in the middle of the meal. The group questions Senshi, reminding him the guy was on the brink of death. Still, he insists the antidote will taste better cooked, so they tell the man to cook quickly. He starts by removing the basilisk's tail and feet, then scalding the meat and plucking the feathers, making it look like an ordinary chicken. After seasoning and adding vegetables and herbs inside, he puts the meat on a spit to roast and finally completes the dish. Once Senshi finishes cooking, they give some of the food to the poisoned guy. He finds the meal delicious, but one spoon isn't enough to completely cure him. Then Marcel prepares to cast a healing spell, but Senshi interrupts to offer the chicken to the rest of the group. The girl complains that she's busy, but seconds later, everyone gets distracted by the taste of the food and forgets about the poisoned man. However, Marcel remembers to cast her healing spell, and after treating the guy, they all enjoy the meal peacefully. The two adventurers are impressed because they have never eaten like that in the dungeon. They reveal that they have been adventuring in that place for 3 months but always get annihilated in the same region, so they wanted to know how to get strong enough to cook monsters like the group. Senshi immediately explains that they should pay attention to 3 things: improve their diet, exercise, and reconsider their circadian rhythm. The two thank them, finding the group amazing and leave determined to follow the advice and do their best. The group continues its journey towards the location of the Red Dragon, reaching the 3rd floor of the dungeon. There, Laios explains that the dragon wakes up once a month to hunt, and they unfortunately encountered it during that time. But this means the creature is currently sleeping on a full stomach, and Laios suggests finding it before it gets hungry again. He urges Marcel, who is slowing down the journey with her slow pace, but then decides it's best to take a break. The girl says she's willing to continue, but Chilchuk explains that if she tries to act tough, she'll end up getting hurt and becoming a burden to the group. Marcel feels bad with the rogue's words, and then Laios suggests trying a different path. Everyone starts suggesting ideas, and Marcel offers to be useful with her magic to defeat the monsters on the way, but the group declines her help, opting for a secret passage with fewer monsters but full of traps. Marcel offers help again, explaining she has spells against traps, but Laios thinks it's faster for Chilchuk to handle them, making the mage feel ignored. Senshi, thinking only about eating and cooking, asks how they will get vegetables for the next meal, emphasizing a complete diet. He reveals there's a mandrake colony nearby, making Marcel excited because these creatures scream when pulled from the ground, potentially causing insanity or death. However, they are crucial in magic and medicine, and she knows the proper way to harvest them, making her feel useful. Marcel explains that according to her magic book, they need a string to tie a dog to the mandrake. The animal will then do the harvesting while they stay at a safe distance. Everyone questions this method since they don't have a dog, and it would harm the animal. Leos thinks it's more efficient for them to pull the mandrake from a distance with a long rope, but this idea terrifies Marcel. She tries to defend the method in her book, but Sensei easily solves the problem, showing that mandrakes don't scream if their heads are cut off before harvesting. The girl questions his method, but the man explains that he has been doing it that way for years and assures it's safe. This makes Leos and Chilchuk question her book once again since Marcel never tested that method out of pity for the dog, unlike Senshi, who had experience and presented a simple, effective method that didn't require anything they didn't already have. Marcel thinks that if there were such a simple way of harvesting, it would be in her manual, but she understands that she would be more convincing if she proved her method in practice. So the girl decides to use a monster instead of the dog, thinking that this would prove to everyone that she was right. As the monsters in the area are giant bats, Marcel goes after the nest, locating it thanks to Leo's book, and sets a trap with a rope. After preparing the string part, she goes to a tower where it's far from the noise. From there, Marcel casts a spell on the nest to make the bats leave their hiding place. The plan works, and one of the bats gets caught in the string, pulling it and releasing a mandrake. The noise attracts the group's attention and leaves the bat desperate. It flies straight to the tower where Marcel was, making her realize why the book said to use a dog and not a bat. Everyone rushes to the tower and finds the girl affected by the mandrake's scream. Leos asks Marcel to keep talking because the effect of the scream would soon pass and asks why she took such a risk. The mage explains that she panicked, not wanting to be just a burden to the group and wanted to prove she was right about the harvesting method. Everyone is understanding, and Leos explains that he didn't want to use his magic yet because they would need it later as monsters get stronger as they progress further into the dungeon. He also explains that everyone in the group has strengths and weaknesses, and she should focus on her strength and let someone else cover her weaknesses. Chilchuk also agrees, saying they need her, and then the girl returns to normal. Then Senshi decides to prepare a basilisk egg dish. Marcel asks why they are much softer than chicken eggs, and Leos explains that snake eggs are like that, and in fact, the basilisk head is the snake, and the tail is the chicken. Next, the cook comes into action and starts preparing another monster dish, finishing with a mandrake and basilisk omelette. Everyone notices that the mandrake Marcel harvested has a lighter flavor, while Senshi's was more bitter, and he deduces that the screams extract the bitterness. He thanks the girl for teaching them how to improve monster cuisine, apologizing for ignoring her book's knowledge. Then Senshi hands over the mandrake heads as a thank you because according to him, it's the best part. But Marcel says her book is not a recipe book and cries because she's tired of eating monsters. Afterward, the group proceeds through the trap-filled path, taking a shortcut that Chilchuk manages to find with his rogue skills. But before they continue, he makes it clear that no one should interfere with his work and do only what he commands. And so the group follows with Chilchuk carefully analyzing the place. Later, he instructs everyone to follow exactly in his footsteps, but Senshi moves carelessly and triggers a trap that almost hits the rogue. The boy scolds the cook, but Senshi doesn't care about what he says and continues his way, activating the traps in the area, putting Chilchuk and himself in danger. But as all the man thinks about is cooking, Senshi is interested in the power of the fire from one of the traps. Chilchuk tells him to be more careful and explains that there might be gas or oil in the place, but this makes Senshi even more interested, thinking the traps are perfect for making a fried dish. Then he asks where the oil trap is. Chilchuk tries to deny it, but with the cook's insistence, he ends up agreeing to show the location, with the condition that Senshi follows his orders around the other traps, since each member of the group had their function, and no one should interfere with each other's work. After Senshi agrees, Chilchuk shows the chest where the oil trap is and tells the cook to step back. Leos explains that the boy usually is the most mature in the group, but having his companions' lives in his hands makes him nervous. After setting everything up, Chilchuk explains where the oil comes out and where the trigger is, but warns that he doesn't know how much the trap will release. However, even after being warned, Senshi just prepares his pan to move forward with his idea. Then Chilchuk pulls the trigger and releases the boiling oil. A drop flies at Leos, making him scream in pain. This worries Chilchuk about Senshi, but the cook holds his pan calmly while thinking of the best way to prepare the dish. Later, Senshi convinces Chilchuk to activate the cutting traps, chop the giant bat's meat into pieces, and after finishing, the rogue is tasked with setting up the fire trap to fry the food. And so Senshi seasons the meat, prepares the rest of the mandrake, and mixes everything in the pan with the basilisk egg. Then he goes to Chilchuk, who had already finished modifying the fire trap, and as if it weren't enough, leaves the boy watching the food, explaining that he should do it because he understands traps. Chilchuk realizes that the temperature was still wrong, thinking he was leaving the fire too low or too high. But Senshi explains that it's not the temperature, but the time it's being left in the pan, showing the correct way to do it. After helping Chilchuk fry, the dish is ready and crispy. While everyone eats, Senshi explains that it's very difficult to fry something in the dungeon, and he didn't know it was possible with traps. Then Chilchuk makes it clear that he couldn't try to prepare this dish without the help of a rogue because he would surely die. But the cook knew the danger because he was aware that he could never manipulate the traps as he did, regretting not being able to fry anything else after separating from the group. This makes Chilchuk sympathize with Senshi, and he says he could teach him how to disarm traps since he taught him how to cook. And so Senshi gains knowledge of the rogue's work. Next week, we'll have more of this anime as soon as the new episode is released, so go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to hit the like button below to support this video. See you guys.